My sister planned her wedding for the same weekend as my son's graduation and called me selfish for choosing. I want to start with the calendar. Not because it is where the story begins. It is not. Not really. The story begins much earlier than that. It begins in a childhood I spent learning to make myself smaller so there would be enough room for my sister. But the calendar is where I finally stopped explaining things away. Where the pattern I had been calling something else for 45 years finally had a name I could not take back. It is a plain wall calendar. The kind teachers get free from school supply companies. I write everything on it. My class schedule, the boys' activities, parent-teacher nights, dentist appointments, my whole life in small, neat handwriting in boxes that are never quite big enough. Marcus's graduation date had been on that calendar since October. Diane announced her wedding date at Sunday dinner in March. I looked at the calendar on the wall behind her head and I did not say anything. I did not say anything because I needed a moment. Because some things require a moment before you respond to them. Because I have spent 14 years as a single mother learning the difference between reacting and responding, and I was not going to react at my mother's dinner table with my boys sitting right there, but I saw it immediately, and I knew with the specific quiet certainty of someone who has known a thing for a long time and has simply been waiting for the evidence to become undeniable that this was not an accident. My name is Angela Davis. I am 45 years old. I teach art to middle schoolers, which people either find admirable or slightly bewildering depending on who you ask, and I have been doing it for 16 years. I love it. I love the particular way a 12-year-old looks when they make something they did not know they were capable of making. I love the mess and the color and the specific chaos of 25 young people discovering what their hands can do. I have 2 sons. Marcus is 14 and graduating from 8th grade in June, moving on to high school. The first real milestone of his life, the one he has been talking about since September. He is quiet and precise and takes everything seriously in the way of a boy who understands that things matter. Darius is 11 and made entirely of energy and opinions, and a laugh that fills whatever room he is in. He is the one strangers stop me about in grocery stores. Something about his face, his presence. He has always been like that. I have raised them alone since Marcus was 1 year old. Not entirely alone. I have friends, I have colleagues, I have a support system I have built carefully over 14 years, but alone in the way that counts. The 3 a.m. way, the sick child on a school night way, the 2 jobs in the early years way. I do not say this for sympathy. I say it because it is the context for everything that follows. My sister's name is Diane. She is 3 years younger than me, 42, and she is, in the geography of our family, the one things were easier for. I want to be precise about that because easy is a complicated word, and I am not interested in being unfair. Diane is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly before I tell you anything else. She is not cruel in the deliberate way. She does not set out to cause harm. What she does is something more ordinary and in some ways more difficult to address. She moves through the world with the particular confidence of someone who has always been the priority and has therefore never had to consider what that cost the people around her. Our mother, her name is Gloria, 67 years old, retired postal worker. The woman at the center of everything. Loves us both. I believe that. I have always believed that. But she loves Diane in the way you love the easy thing, the thing that does not require navigation, the thing that arrives without complications and stays without conditions. I arrived with complications. A pregnancy at 31 from a relationship that ended before Marcus took his first breath. A divorce that was not dramatic but was difficult. 2 boys and a teacher's salary, and a life that required constant management. Diane arrived uncomplicated. Never married until now. No children. A job in marketing that she is good at and that pays well. An apartment she has decorated beautifully. And a social life that has always been full. She has always been, in our family's internal language, the one things worked out for. I have always been the one who worked things out. The Sunday dinner was the 3rd weekend in March. My mother makes dinner every other Sunday. This is a tradition that has existed for as long as I can remember and that I have attended consistently, even through the years when attending consistently required a level of logistical effort that most people would have considered unreasonable. I bring the boys. My mother loves the boys. Whatever else is complicated about our family, my mother's love for Marcus and Darius is not complicated. It is the clearest thing about her. Diane was already there when we arrived. She was in the kitchen with my mother, which was usual. They always started without me, which I had long ago stopped registering as a slight and had simply accepted as the texture of Sunday dinners. We ate. The food was good. Marcus talked about his graduation project. Darius needed to be redirected from the breadbasket approximately 4 times. My mother asked me about school, and I told her about a student whose work had been selected for a district arts showcase, and she said that was wonderful, in the genuine way she has when something genuinely pleases her. It was a good dinner, until dessert. Diane had been quieter than usual through the meal. I noticed it and filed it away in the way I file things that do not yet have enough information attached to them to be understood. She waited until my mother brought the pie to the table. Then she put her hand flat on the table, a gesture I recognized. She has always done that when she is about to say something she considers significant. And she said, "I have an announcement." My mother looked up with the expression she gets when Diane is about to say something she has already been told privately. pleased. Ready. The expression of someone who already knows the punchline. Diane said she was engaged to a man named Robert, whom she had been seeing for 2 years and whom I had met 4 times and found perfectly pleasant in the unremarkable way of a person you have not spent enough time with to have a real opinion about. Marcus said congratulations. Darius asked if there would be cake at the wedding. My mother reached across the table and took Diane's hand. I said congratulations. I meant it. And then Diane said the date. June 14th. I looked at the calendar on the wall behind her head. June 14th. Marcus's graduation was June 13th, the ceremony in the evening. The family dinner we had been planning afterward. Just us. The boys and me and my mother and 2 close friends on the 14th. I looked at the calendar. I looked at my mother. My mother was looking at Diane. June 14th. I said, I know it's soon, Diane said, but Robert's family has a venue connection and the date opened up and it felt right. Marcus graduates June 13th, I said. The table went quiet. Diane looked at me. I know, she said. 2 words. I know. Not I forgot. Not I did not realize. Not I am so sorry. Let me look at other dates. I know. I did not make a scene. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I did not raise my voice. I did not say the things that were moving through my mind in that moment. I looked at my sister across my mother's dinner table and I said, we should talk about this. Diane nodded. My mother said, I'm sure we can figure something out. I looked at the calendar one more time. The date was right there, in my own handwriting, in the box I had filled in last October when the school sent home the graduation schedule. I had told them both. I knew I had told them both. I drove home that night with the boys in the back seat, and Marcus fell asleep against the window the way he used to when he was small. And I drove and I thought about 2 words. I know. Not a slip. Not an oversight, a choice, and the question I could not stop turning over. The one that kept me awake long after the boys were in bed. Was not why Diane had chosen that date. Already knew why. The question was what I was going to do about it. I called Diane on Tuesday, not Monday. I gave myself Monday to think, to make sure that what I said when I called her came from the considered part of me, and not the part that had been lying awake Sunday night replaying I know on a loop. I have learned, across 14 years of making decisions alone, that the 24-hour rule is real. That the thing you want to say immediately is rarely the thing that actually needs to be said. That patience is not the same as avoidance. It is just the discipline of waiting until you are ready to say the true thing instead of the reactive one. I was ready on Tuesday, called her in the evening after the boys were settled. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and I called my sister. She picked up on the second ring. I've been waiting for you to call, she said. Not I've been meaning to call you. Not I'm glad you reached out. She had been waiting for me to call, which meant she knew the call was coming and had positioned herself as the one waiting rather than the one reaching out. I noticed that. I want to talk about the date, I said. I figured, she said. Diane. I kept my voice even. Marcus's graduation is June 13th. The dinner we have been planning is June 14th. You know both of those things. You said so at dinner? I know, she said again. But Angela, we had this venue opportunity, and these things don't come up often, and Robert and I have been together for 2 years, and we are not getting any younger. I understand all of that, I said. I am asking whether you considered the date before you chose it. A pause. Of course I considered it, she said. And I thought you could come to the graduation on the 13th and then come to the wedding on the 14th. They are not the same day. You can do both. I sat with that for a moment. The dinner, I said. The family dinner we planned for the 14th. The one my son has been looking forward to. We could move the dinner, she said. Do it the night of the graduation. It does not have to be the 14th. Marcus chose the 14th, I said. He chose it specifically. He wanted a day between the ceremony and the dinner. He said it would feel less rushed. Silence. He's 14, Angela, she said. He'll understand. I want to tell you what happened in my body when she said that. Nothing dramatic. Not anger in the way anger usually announces itself. Something quieter, a settling, the specific internal stillness that comes when something you have suspected for a long time is confirmed so plainly that there is no longer any work required to see it. He's 14. He'll understand. My son, whose milestone this was, whose day this was, he'll understand. He will not be asked to understand, I said. Excuse me? My son will not be asked to adjust his graduation celebration around a wedding date that was chosen after the graduation was already on the calendar, I said. I am not going to ask that of him. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that has weight. So you're not coming to my wedding. I did not say that, I said. I said I am not asking Marcus to adjust his celebration. Those are different things. They are the same thing, she said. If you choose his graduation dinner over my wedding, you are not coming to my wedding. You chose the date, Diane, and you're choosing him over me. I have thought about that sentence many times since that Tuesday phone call. You're choosing him over me. The particular framing of it. The way it positioned my son's 8th grade graduation, the milestone of a boy I have raised alone for 14 years as something being chosen against my sister rather than something being chosen for my child. I have thought about what it reveals about how she sees the world. Not maliciously. That is the thing I keep coming back to. She was not being deliberately cruel. She genuinely experienced my choice as a rejection of her. Genuinely could not locate, in the architecture of how she understood things, a version of the situation in which the problem was the date she had chosen. In her version, there was no problem with the date. In her version, the problem was me. Diane, I said, I love you. I want to be at your wedding. I want to celebrate with you. But I need you to hear me when I tell you that I am not in a position to ask my son to make his graduation smaller so that your wedding can be larger. I need you to hear that. You're being dramatic, she said. Am I? Nobody is asking him to make anything smaller. You can do both. I can attend both, I said. What I cannot do is give his celebration the presence it deserves if I am managing a wedding the next day. You know that. You know how these things work. Other people manage more than one thing at a time, she said. I manage more than one thing at a time every single day, I said quietly. That is not the point. She did not respond to that. The conversation went on for another 20 minutes. I will not take you through all of it because much of it was circular, the particular circular quality of a conversation, where one person is trying to be heard and the other person is repositioning every attempt at honesty as an attack. What I will tell you is how it ended, she said. I think you are using Marcus as an excuse. An excuse for what? I said. To not support me. You have never fully supported me, and this is just the latest version of that. I held the phone and I looked at my kitchen wall and I thought about 14 years. About every Sunday dinner I had driven to with 2 boys in the back seat. About every family event I had attended and managed and shown up for. About every time I had put my own needs last to keep the peace. I have always supported you, I said. I have just not always agreed with you. Those are different things, not to me, she said, and then she said the word, "You're being selfish." Angela, I did not respond to that immediately. I let it sit in the air between us for a moment, and then I said, I need to go check on the boys. We will talk again soon. I ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table and I looked at my tea which had gone cold while I was on the phone. Selfish. I turned the word over. Not defensively. I was past defensiveness with Diane. I turned it over the way I turn over a word with my students when we are looking at it carefully. What does it actually mean? Where does it come from? What is it doing in this sentence? She had called me selfish for choosing my son's graduation over her wedding. Wedding scheduled on a date she chose after the graduation was already on the calendar. I thought about that for a long time. I called my friend, Renee, the next morning. Renee has been my closest friend for 11 years. She knows my family. She knows the history. She listens without immediately offering solutions, which is the rarest and most valuable quality in a person. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Has your mother said anything?" I realized I had been waiting for her to ask that, because my mother's silence since Sunday dinner was its own kind of answer, and I had not yet decided what to do with it. My mother called me on Thursday, 4 days after the Sunday dinner, 2 days after my phone call with Diane. 4 days of silence from the woman who calls me every few days under normal circumstances, who calls to ask about the boys, to tell me something she saw on the news, to share a recipe she tried. 4 days. I had been aware of the silence the way you are aware of a sound that has stopped. Not loudly, just present in its absence. She called on Thursday evening and I answered and she said, "How are you doing, baby?" My mother has called me baby my entire life. It is one of the things I love about her without complication. "I'm okay," I said. "How are you?" "I've been thinking," she said. "About Sunday?" "What about it?" A pause. "I think," she said carefully, "that you and Diane need to find a way to work this out. For the family." I want to tell you what I noticed about that sentence. Not what she said. What she did not say. She did not say I talked to Diane about the date. She did not say I think Diane should have been more considerate. She did not say I understand why you are upset in any version or form. She said, "You and Diane need to find a way to work this out. You and Diane." As if the situation were symmetrical. As if there were 2 people who had each done something that needed to be worked out. As if a woman choosing a wedding date that conflicted with her nephew's graduation and a woman declining to rearrange her son's celebration were equivalent actions requiring equivalent compromise. "Mom," I said, "what do you think I should do?" "I think," she said, "that weddings only happen once, and that Marcus will have many more graduations." I sat down. "He will have 1 8th grade graduation," I said. "This one." "I know that, Angela. But Diane is your sister, and Marcus is my son." Silence. "I'm not asking you to miss the graduation," my mother said. "Nobody is asking that. I'm asking you to think about what it would mean to your sister if you weren't at her wedding. Has anyone asked Diane what it would mean to Marcus if his celebration was rearranged?" The silence that followed was long enough to be its own answer. Here is what I understood in that silence. My mother had talked to Diane before she called me. I was certain of that. The careful language, "I think you and Diane need to work this out," was not spontaneous. It was considered. It was the language of someone who had already had a version of this conversation with one party and was now having it with the other. She had called Diane first, or Diane had called her. Either way, by the time my mother called me on Thursday evening, the conversation had already been shaped. The framing had already been established. And the framing was, Angela needs to find a way to support her sister. Not, Diane needs to reconsider her date. Not, how do we make sure Marcus's graduation gets the celebration it deserves? Angela needs to find a way. I had been the one who needed to find a way my entire life. "Mom," I said, "can I ask you something directly?" "Of course. Did you know about the date before Sunday dinner?" A pause, 1 beat too long. "Diane mentioned she was looking at June dates," she said. "Did she mention the 14th specifically?" Another pause. "We talked about it briefly. she said. I closed my eyes. And you didn't say anything, I said. About Marcus. I thought... She stopped. I thought Diane had already spoken to you about it. She had not. I understand that now. But you knew, I said, before Sunday dinner. You knew the date and you knew about Marcus's graduation and you sat at that table and you let Diane make her announcement and you did not say anything. My mother was quiet. Mom, I didn't want to interfere, she said, and there it was. The sentence underneath the sentence. She did not want to interfere with Diane. She had been willing to let me walk into that Sunday dinner without warning, had been willing to let me hear it at the table, in front of my boys, without any preparation, had chosen Diane's announcement over my ability to receive it with any kind of readiness. Because she did not want to interfere with Diane. I have a word for this. Not a cruel word, not a dramatic one, just an accurate one. The word is preference. My mother preferred Diane's comfort over mine, had always preferred it. Not dramatically. Not in the ways that make for obvious stories, in the small, consistent ways that are harder to name and easier to explain. A way. Diane was called first. Diane was consulted. Diane's announcement was protected, and I was the one who needed to find a way. I did not say any of that to my mother on Thursday evening. I was not ready to say it yet, and I did not want to say it in the heat of the conversation, and I did not want to say it in a way that could be characterized as an attack. I said, I hear you. Mom, I need some time to think. She said, don't wait too long. Diane is hurt. I almost laughed, not cruelly. Just the specific involuntary response of someone encountering a level of irony that the body registers before the mind does. Diane is hurt. I'll be in touch, I said. I ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after. Darius came downstairs for water and found me there and looked at me with the particular alert concern of a child who has learned to read their mother's silences. You okay, Mom? I'm okay, baby, I said. Go back to bed, he went, but he stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. Is it about Aunt Diane's wedding? He said. I looked at my 11-year-old. Why do you ask that? He shrugged in the way 11-year-olds shrug when they know more than they are saying. Marcus is upset, he said. He won't say so, but he is. I know, I said. I'm handling it. He nodded and went upstairs. I sat alone in my kitchen, and I thought about my 14-year-old son lying in his room, upset about something he would not say so. And I decided that the time for finding a way was over. It was time to say the thing clearly. Called Renee again. I told her about the conversation with my mother, the 4 days of silence, the I didn't want to interfere, the Diane is hurt. Renee listened to all of it. When I finished, she said, what are you going to do? I'm going to talk to Marcus, I said. I'm going to ask him what he wants. Not what I want. Not what Diane wants. Not what my mother thinks would be best for the family. What he wants. And then I am going to stop managing everyone else's feelings about my decision. I said, whatever that decision turns out to be. Renee was quiet for a moment. How does that feel? She said. Terrifying, I said. And right, I talked to Marcus on Friday evening. Not immediately after the phone call with Renee. I waited until the next evening because I wanted it to be quiet. Darius at a friend's house. Dinner done. The particular settled quality of a Friday when the week is over and nobody needs to be anywhere. Marcus was at his desk when I knocked on his door. He was drawing. He draws constantly, pages of it. Detailed, intricate things that I frame and hang when he is not looking. He got it from me. I like to think that. Hey, I said. Can we talk? He swiveled his chair. He looked at me with the careful expression he has been wearing for 2 weeks. Since Sunday dinner, since the announcement, since he came home that night and went straight to his room without his usual commentary about the drive. About the wedding? He said. Yes, he nodded. He waited. I sat on the edge of his bed and I looked at my son, 14 years old. The age where they are caught between the child they were and the person they are becoming. And some days you can see both versions in the same face. I told him the truth, not a managed version, not the version where I protected him from the complexity of it. He was 14, and he was the person most affected by this situation. And he deserved the truth. I told him about the date, about the conversation with Diane, about what my mother had said. He listened without interrupting. He has always been a good listener, this boy. Always been the kind of person who gives you the whole space of what you are saying before he responds. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, what do you want to do, Mom? Not what should we do? Not what are you going to do? What do you want to do? 14 years old, and he asked me what I wanted. I looked at him and I felt something move in my chest that was complicated and specific. The particular emotion of a parent who realizes in a single moment how much their child has absorbed about how the world works, about whose needs get centered and whose get managed. He was asking me what I wanted because he had noticed, across his 14 years, that I was not often asked that. I want to be at your graduation dinner, I said. I want to give that day everything it deserves. That is what I want. He nodded slowly. Then do that. He said. It means missing the wedding. I said, I know. Aunt Diane is upset. I know that too. He turned back to his desk briefly and then turned back to me. Can I say something? He said, always. She picked that date on purpose. He said, I don't know why. But she knew. Grandma knew. And nobody said anything to you. And now you're the one being asked to fix it. I looked at my son. I'm not saying she's a bad person, he said quickly. I'm just saying that's what happened, and I don't think you should have to fix it. I did not trust my voice for a moment. I sat on the edge of my son's bed, and I looked at the drawings on his desk. Intricate, careful, the work of a boy who pays attention to detail. And I thought about the 14 years I had spent making sure he knew that he mattered, that his milestones mattered, that the things that were important to him were worth protecting. He had learned it. He had learned it so well that he was sitting here at 14, telling his mother that she should not have to fix other people's choices. He had learned it from watching me not do it for myself. The irony of that sat in the room with us for a moment. I love you, I said. I know, he said. The 14-year-old version of that, slightly embarrassed, completely genuine. I stood up. Whatever happens, I said, your graduation dinner is happening exactly the way you planned it. That is not a discussion, he nodded. And Mom? He said. Yeah. Darius cried, he said, the night of Sunday dinner. He didn't want you to know, but I thought you should. I went to Darius's room. He was asleep. It was late. Past his bedtime, his face completely relaxed in the way children's faces are when they are finally down. I stood in the doorway and looked at my 11-year-old son, and I thought about him coming downstairs for water and finding me at the kitchen table. Is it about Aunt Diane's wedding? He had known. He had read the room the way children of single mothers learn to read rooms. He had gone back to bed and apparently cried about it where I could not. See, because he did not want to add to what I was carrying. 11 years old, I stood in that doorway for a long time, and something shifted in me that had been in place for a very long time. Not anger, not resolve exactly. Something quieter than both of those, a decision. I called Diane the next morning, Saturday, early, before she would be fully into her day, which was deliberate. Not strategic, just honest. I wanted the conversation to happen before either of us had spent the day building up the version of ourselves. We were going to present to the other. She answered on the third ring. Angela, I wanted to tell you directly, I said. Not through Mom, not through a text, directly. Okay, she said. I am going to be at Marcus's graduation on June 13th. I said, and I am going to be at his graduation dinner on June 14th. That is my decision, and I am not going to change it. Silence. So you're not coming to my wedding, she said. I am not able to be at your wedding on June 14th, I said. I want you to understand that I am not saying this to hurt you. I am saying it because it is true and because you deserve a direct answer. I deserve a sister who shows up for me, she said. I have shown up for you my entire life, I said. I am asking you to hear that clearly. Showing up when it is convenient is not the same as showing up when it costs something, she said. That sentence? I have thought about it many times since, because there is something almost impressive about it. The way it reframed the entire situation. In her version, I was the person who only showed up when it was convenient. In her version, the cost was mine to bear. The cost of her date, her choice, her announcement at a Sunday dinner she had, arranged so that I would have no warning. In her version, I was the one who had failed to show up. I have spent a lot of time thinking about how a person arrives at that version of events. Not to be uncharitable, genuinely trying to understand it. And what I have come to is this. When you have been the priority your entire life, being asked to share the calendar feels like being deprioritized. When you have never had to consider that your choices might cost someone else something, being asked to consider it feels like an attack. I understood where she was coming from. I just could not go there with her. I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be, I said. I mean that genuinely. Angela, I love you. Diane, I'll talk to you soon. I ended the call. My phone rang 11 minutes later. My mother. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I answered. And my mother said something I had never heard her say in 45 years. Not an apology. Not yet. Something before an apology. Something that told me she had been sitting with the week the same way I had been sitting with it, and that she had arrived somewhere different than where she started. My mother said, I owe you an honest conversation. Not I think we should talk. Not I've been thinking about everything. She said I owe you an honest conversation. In the specific language of a woman who has been sitting with a debt and has finally decided to acknowledge it. I sat down. I'm listening, I said. She talked for a long time. I am going to tell you the shape of it rather than every word. Some of it belongs to her, and to the particular private work of a parent examining herself honestly, which I want to respect. She said she knew about the date before Sunday dinner. Not briefly. The way she had said on Thursday. She had known for 2 weeks. Diane had called her when she and Robert were first looking at June dates and had asked what she thought, and she had said she thought it would work out. She had not asked about Marcus. She had not thought to ask about Marcus. And that, she said, is what I have been sitting with all week that I did not think to ask. Why didn't you? I said. She was quiet for a moment. Because when Diane calls me with something I am happy about, I stop thinking about everything else. She said. I have always done that, and I have not always understood what that cost you. I want to tell you how I received that, not with the immediate relief that these conversations are supposed to bring, not with tears or a rush of released tension. I received it the way I receive most things, carefully, with one part of my mind checking it against what I knew to be true. It was true. I knew it was true because it described something I had experienced my entire life and had been calling other things. Diane's enthusiasm, my mother's happiness for her, the way good news about Diane filled the room in a particular way. It was true. And it was not enough to fix everything. Both of those things were true simultaneously. Thank you for saying that, I said. I should have said it sooner, she said. I should have called you before I called Diane this week. I called her first and I should not have. I was managing her feelings before I had even checked on yours. You've always done that, I said gently, not as an accusation, as an observation that I was finally allowing myself to make out loud. I know, she said. The word landed differently coming from her. Angela, she said. You have been doing this alone for 14 years, and I have shown up in the ways I knew how to show up, but I have not always seen what you were carrying. No, I said. You haven't. I'm sorry for that. We talked for almost an hour. It was not a resolution. I want to be honest about that because I am suspicious of stories where a single conversation resolves decades of complexity. This was not that. It was a beginning. The specific, careful beginning of a more honest version of a relationship that had been operating on a set of assumptions that no longer served either of us. She asked about Marcus, not in the managed way, genuinely. What was he feeling? How was he handling it? Had I talked to him? I told her about Friday evening. About what he said, she was quiet for a long time. He sounds like you, she said finally. He sounds like himself. I said, yes, she said. He does. She asked me toward the end of the call what I needed from her. I thought about that question. It is a question I am not often asked. I have become, across the years, a person who does not wait to be asked, who identifies what she needs and finds a way to meet it or does without. It is a survival skill. It is also, I have come to understand, a way of preemptively protecting yourself from the experience of asking and not receiving. I had been protecting myself from that experience with my mother for a long time. I need you to tell Diane, I said, that the date was a problem. Not that I am being difficult. Not that we need to work it out. That the date was a problem and that you should have said so when she first asked you about it. Silence. That will upset her, my mother said. I know, I said. She is already, Mom, I said. I know it will upset her. I am asking you to do it anyway. A long pause. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll talk to her, she said. Today, I sat after the call. At the kitchen table. I do a lot of thinking at that table. It has become the place where the significant things happen in my interior life. The boys were at a neighbor's yard. I could hear them through the window. The particular outdoor noise of children on a Saturday morning. I thought about what my mother had said. I thought about what she had not said. And there was still plenty she had not said. Plenty that existed in the space between what she had offered and what a full accounting would look like. I was not under any illusion that one phone call resolved 30 years of a pattern, but I thought about the words she had used. I owe you an honest conversation. Not, let me explain. Not, let me defend myself. Not, you need to understand my perspective. I owe you. For a woman of my mother's generation, a woman who had built her identity around being a good mother, who would not easily acknowledge a failure in that, those words cost something. I held that. Diane called me that evening, after my mother had spoken to her, presumably. Her voice was different from the previous conversations. Not warm, not apologetic, but quieter. The specific quiet of someone who has been told something they did not want to hear and is processing it. Mom talked to me, she said. I know, I said. She said the date was inconsiderate. Yes. A pause. I didn't mean it to be, she said. I thought about I know at Sunday dinner. Thought about whether I believed her. And the honest answer was, I believed that she had not meant it to be cruel. I believed that she had seen the date and seen the conflict, and made a decision that prioritized what she wanted, without fully processing what it cost. Not from malice, from the particular blindness of a person who had never had to think very hard about that kind of cost. I know you didn't mean it to be, I said, but it was, she said, quietly. Yes, I said. It was. Another pause. I don't know if we can move the venue, she said. Robert's family has the connection, and the date was part of the arrangement, and I don't know if Diane, I said. I am not asking you to move the venue. I made my decision. I am going to be at Marcus's graduation dinner. That is settled. So you're really not coming. I am really not coming on June 14th. I said. That is true. And it is a consequence of the date that was chosen. Not of anything I am choosing against you. She was quiet for a long time. I need time, she said finally. Take it. I said, I'm not going anywhere. June 13th arrived the way milestones arrive, faster than expected and more weighted than you prepared for. Marcus in his graduation clothes. Darius inexplicably emotional about his brother, which he covered by making jokes until Marcus told him to stop, and they argued briefly about it, and I looked at both of them and thought, this is what I protected. My mother came. She sat next to me in the gymnasium and she watched her grandson walk across that stage and she held my hand without being asked. That was new. After the ceremony, in the parking lot, she looked at me and she said, thank you for not letting this be smaller than it was. I looked at her. I did not say anything, but I held her hand back. June 14th was a Saturday. I woke up early, earlier than I needed to. The particular early of someone whose body understands that a day matters before their mind has fully caught up to it. I lay in bed for a while listening to the house, the specific morning quiet of a home with teenagers who sleep late on weekends. I had made a reservation at Marcus's restaurant of choice, a place he had been asking to go for months, the kind of restaurant that felt like a celebration without being performative about it. Nothing elaborate. A good table, good food, the people he wanted around him, Somewhere across the city, at a venue I had never seen, my sister was getting married. I thought about her for a moment, genuinely, not with bitterness. I want to be honest about that, but with the complicated mix of feelings that had been sitting in me since March. Love, because she was my sister, and that did not simply stop. Sadness, because things between us were not resolved and would not be resolved quickly. Something else underneath both of those. Something I was still finding the precise word for. I got up and made coffee and started the day. The dinner reservation was for 6 o'clock. My mother arrived at our house at 4, which I had not expected. I had assumed she would meet us at the restaurant. She knocked on the door and stood on the porch with a wrapped gift under her arm and a look on her face that was trying to be casual and not quite managing it. I opened the door. I thought I'd come early, she said. If that's all right. Of course, I said. She came in. She sat at the kitchen table while I finished getting ready, and she talked to Darius, who was in full commentary mode about his brother's graduation. A detailed analysis of who had tripped on the stage stairs and whether the principal's speech had been too long. My mother laughed at all of it. Real laughter. The easy kind. Marcus came downstairs in his good clothes, and my mother stood up and looked at him for a moment in the way grandmothers look at grandchildren at milestones. Like she was trying to memorize him at this exact age. "You look wonderful," she said. "Thanks, Grandma," he said. She hugged him, a long one, and over his shoulder she looked at me. I held her gaze. We did not need to say anything. Renee and her daughter met us at the restaurant. Marcus's best friend Tyler came with his mother, a woman named Carol, who I have known since our boys were in 2nd grade together, and who brought the exact right energy to every gathering she attended. Warm, funny, present without being overwhelming. 8 people around a table. Not a large celebration. Not the kind of event that photographs as significant. No balloons, no banners, no production. Just a table of people who had chosen to be there, who had made it the priority. I looked around that table and I thought about the word selfish. I thought about what it had meant in Diane's usage. The accusation of a woman who experienced being declined as a form of being abandoned. And I thought about what the word actually meant, applied honestly. Was it selfish to give my son the celebration he had asked for? To protect the day he had been looking forward to since September? To decline to manage someone else's discomfort at the cost of his milestone? I had been asking myself that question since March, sitting at that table on June 14th. I finally had my answer. No, it was not selfish. It was the most fundamental thing a mother does. It was seeing her child clearly and protecting what mattered. To him, without apologizing for it, I had been calling that selfish my whole life. I was done calling it that. Marcus gave a small speech at dinner. Not planned. He is not a planned speech person. It came out of a moment when Tyler made a joke about high school and Marcus suddenly got quieter and more thoughtful and put down his fork. He talked about the last year, about things he had been working through, about what it had meant to him in a year that had been difficult in the particular way that 14 is often difficult, to feel like the people around him were paying attention. He did not mention the wedding. He did not mention Diane or the date or any of it. He said, "I just want to say thank you to my mom for always making me feel like the things that matter to me actually matter." The table was quiet for a moment. Darius said, "Are you going to cry?" in the specific tone of a younger sibling. Everyone laughed. Marcus threw a bread roll at him. My mother reached over and put her hand on mine. I held it. We left the restaurant at 9. The evening was warm, that particular early summer warmth that arrives in June and feels like permission. We walked to the cars slowly. Nobody was in a hurry. My mother walked beside me. "How do you feel?" she said. "Good," I said. "Really good. I have been thinking," she said slowly, "about what I want to do differently going forward." "Mom, let me finish," she said. "I am not asking you to make any decisions tonight. I am just telling you that I have been thinking about the years, about the ways I showed up and the ways I did not." I let her talk. She talked about small things, specific things. The particularity of someone who had been doing a genuine accounting and was not going to offer generalities as a substitute. I listened. I did not offer her easy absolution. That is not what either of us needed. What I offered her was the same thing she had offered me on the phone. Honesty. "I want a better version of what we are," I said. "I think that's possible. I don't think it happens overnight." "No," she said, "it doesn't. But I'm here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded. We reached the cars. She hugged me. A real one. Longer than our usual. And then she hugged the boys and told Marcus she was proud of him and told Darius she loved him and got in her car. I watched her drive away. I want to tell you about Diane, because I know you are wondering and because leaving her out would be the incomplete version of this story. She called me 3 weeks after the wedding. Not to pick up where we left off, not to have the big conversation. Just I had to call, to say that the wedding was good, that Robert was good, that she had been thinking. I said I was glad to hear it. We talked for 20 minutes. Careful, both of us. The specific care of 2 people who understand that there is distance between them that did not used to be there, and that closing it, if it closes, will take time. She said, "I know I was unfair. Not, I'm sorry, not yet, but I know I was unfair." I held that. "Thank you for saying so," I said. "I'm still working on the rest," she said. "I know. I said. So am I. There is something I think about sometimes when the dust of that spring has settled enough for me to look at it clearly. The calendar on the wall at my mother's house. June 14th in my handwriting. Marcus's graduation dinner. Put there in October because I had learned across 14 years of managing everything alone that you write things down, that you make the important things visible. I had made it visible, and it had been seen and considered and placed second anyway. What I did not expect, what the spring taught me, in the slow way that the important lessons always arrive, was that the response to being placed second is not to become smaller. It is to become clearer about what you will protect, about what you will require, about the difference between keeping the peace and losing yourself in the process. I have spent 45 years being the one who found a way. I am still that person. I am practical and capable, and I find ways every single day. The difference is that I have stopped finding ways that cost my children something, have stopped calling that selfish, and I have started calling it what it actually is, a mother doing what mothers are supposed to do, without apology.